Thank you very much. Well, not everybody in D.C. is willing to sit back and let the Treasury Secretary spend hundreds of billions of your dollars to no avail. Republican Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio is trying to set some kind of limits on TARP spending, even though the odds are against him. Clearly, he joins us now. Always a pleasure to see you, Congressman. Thanks for having me. First of all, on Tim Geithner, what do you think? Does he deserve the job?
Well, you know, I thought Michelle Malkin had a great column this morning in this morning's Washington Times, and she points out the comparison between Joe the plumber, who didn't pay $1,800 in tax, got a tax lien sent to his, a notice sent to his former residence, and here's a private citizen who got involved in the presidential campaign. He was raked through the coals, and yet we have a guy who is going to be treasurer in charge of the IRS who didn't pay $43,000, and he's going to get confirmed for the job. And I think it's
exactly. Well, the point is, Congressman, it's okay not to pay your taxes if you're going to head the IRS. I think that's the message that they're sending out, right?
Well, the other thing they're saying, this is what I think is funny, too. We've heard this argument with some of these financial institutions, with AIG, Fannie Mae. They're too big to fail. And the argument we've been getting from some of the senators who are looking at this issue with Mr. Geithner is he's too smart to fail. We need this guy at this critical time. You know, we've got to remember there are 304 million people in this country. My guess is there's some smart individual in that makeup who paid their taxes on time, who could do the job. So I think it's sort of comical that the treatment you see Joe the plumber get and what the treatment Tim Geithner looks like he's getting.
Let's talk about what he has done so far. And again, we don't know how much of TARP he was responsible for, but clearly he was part of the brain trust that developed this idea of TARP, which just about everybody, I think, is now willing to admit hasn't worked, at least so far. Some people will say, well, it could have been much worse. Forget about it. You throw those arguments out the window.
Right.
So should we be hiring somebody who was part architect of a plan that hasn't worked?
Well, I think that's a valid question. I hope that's pursued more. As you know, we voted today in the House. I voted against it. A new accountability and transparency kind of provision or legislation to help the TARP program work better. But this is just another attempt. Congress is good at this. Trying to take a bad idea and clean it up and make it look presentable. It's still a bad idea. And hopefully this $350 billion second tranche of money won't be released, and we can get back to conserving some taxpayer dollars and actually doing some things that are going to grow our economy, like cutting tax rates for small business owners and families.
Let me stop you there, because you said something that I frankly haven't heard from anybody inside the Beltway over the past week, which is that maybe we shouldn't spend that $350 billion. It seems like Democrats and Republicans were all in. Okay, we're gonna spend the second tranche. We have to. You're saying no. Is there any chance that your say might have some say inside the Beltway?
Well, we're trying to focus on what, I mean, the whole talk is what can help get us out of the economic situation we're in. Is it more of the same, which is more government spending, more control from the bureaucrats and politicians in Washington, or should we have the real debate in this country? The debate I think the American people want to see. Should we cut taxes for small business owners and families and let them grow and foster economic growth in our economy? Or should we continue down the path we've been trying, which is government? Think about it. We're going to run the largest deficit in American history this fiscal year. If deficit spending was going to get us out of this economic situation, we'd already be out of it.
Absolutely. So let's have the real debate. Congressman, we were given a lot to think about today during these hearings, not the least of which we had a number put on how much these guys want the banks to be bailed out to the tune of $3 trillion. That's what Chuck Schumer said. That's what Paul Volcker said.
It's scary.
Apparently that's what Tim Geithner. Now, if we just wasted $350 billion, which is the biggest amount of money we have ever wasted in a shorter period of time ever in the history of the United States, why do we want to go down the same route for $3 trillion?
Exactly. We're throwing trillions around, the trillion word around like we used to throw billion and million around. You know, sometimes I think, David, that the big spenders in Washington won't be happy until they actually have the IV that's hooked up to the taxpayer wallet and they can hit the drip button whenever they want. It is getting that bad. What we are doing to our kids' and grandkids' future is just wrong. We're now approaching this year, the deficit will be close to 10% of GDP. Right. We have never in the history of the United States reach that kind of level where we run that kind of deficit and take our debt to close to $11 trillion.
And Congressman, we haven't even begun to talk about Social Security and Medicare and everything, but let's just stay on focus now. What can the folks out there who think we have wasted the first tranche, which is just about everybody, and think that we shouldn't spend $350 billion more dollars on a plan that hasn't been working, what can we possibly do to stop you guys from spending it?
Well, there's a vote tomorrow. I'm going to be voting against it, and we're going to be working on other members to do the same on releasing the dollar. So that's one. But second, I think, and I keep coming back because I think this is critical, given the choice, if the American people say, do we want a program that spends more of your dollars, runs the deficit up even more, adds to the national debt, centralized government planning, politicians and bureaucrats doing the spending, or do we want a plan that says, you know what, let's cut taxes for families and small business, which would, they're going to choose the tax cuts. And think about it, in this stimulus plan that's been brought, there is talk of $30 million for the National Endowment for the Arts, $300 million for AmeriCorps. There's talk about buying a new fleet of cars for the government, for the federal government agencies. Is that the kind of economic stimulus
listen,
we want?
crazy,
or do we want tax cuts that allow families to go buy a car?
Congressman, as crazy as all that stuff is, and I agree with you 100%, it's chump change. Chump change when you compare it to the trillions of dollars that these guys still want to spend on TARP 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. I mean, it's just extraordinary how much money.
It's scary.
I got to run, but when will it stop? When will we admit this hasn't worked and we should get off of this road?
When the American people continue to press the members of Congress to vote no, which I plan to do tomorrow.
All right. Jim Jordan,
Thank you so much,
Congressman
David.
from Ohio. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you again. So,